Stephen Heidemann is the director of the Middle East Studies program at Smith College. He joins us now live from Washington, D.C. Stephen, thanks so much for being with us on Al Jazeera. As we just saw in Mohammed Val's report, Aleppo used to be the economic heart of Syria, but so much of it is still in ruins. There was an important and vibrant manufacturing sector in Aleppo. So I want to ask you, what steps need to be taken to get things up and running in places like Aleppo and to jumpstart the economy in Syria?
One of the most important steps is the removal of sanctions, is the lifting of sanctions, and in particular, lifting third-party sanctions that had been imposed by the U.S. that were a huge obstacle to investment by interested parties from other countries. If those sanctions could be removed, I think we would see significant interest in reinvesting in Aleppo and rebuilding its capacity as a manufacturing hub. But we shouldn't underestimate how big a task rebuilding will be. It's not only wartime destruction that business actors have to cope with, it's how much of Aleppo's industrial capacity was taken out of the country, was moved out into Turkey during the conflict, and it now needs to return to Aleppo. Buildings need to be restored. As your correspondent noted, power outages need to be addressed. So there are many, many issues that now have to be overcome before Aleppo will once again restore its role as Syria's economic hub.
Stephen, you're talking about the issue of sanctions. Of course, that is key to what the new administration in Syria has been urging the international community. Time and again over the course of the past few weeks, we've heard from the new administration. They've been urging the U.S. to lift sanctions. How much relief would it give Syria if all of those sanctions, or even some of those sanctions, were lifted in the near term? And how does the economy come to be revived if that does not happen?
Well, right now, the U.S. is discussing steps it can take while the process of lifting sanctions gets underway. And one of them is to issue what's called a general license, authorizing trade and investment in Syria that could be a temporary measure until sanctions can be lifted. When it comes to which sanctions are most important to be removed, I think I would focus on the sanctions that were imposed on the Syrian Central Bank, for one thing, and the second are the sanctions on the energy sector, because oil production, even though Syria is not a major oil producer, provided about a quarter of public revenue in the period before the war. And that has completely disappeared since the conflict erupted and sanctions were imposed. If it were possible to revitalize the energy sector, it would not only help address power shortages within Syria, but it would provide the government with a much, much stronger revenue stream that it could then put to use, rebuilding capacity for industry to recover.
Stephen, there's been this flurry of diplomatic activity in Damascus over the course of the past few weeks. So many delegations going, visiting, meeting with the new administration there. And I want to ask you about that fact. From your vantage point, is that an encouraging sign that the international community is going to step up and actually give Syria the tools that it needs to help rebuild its economy?
I think the diplomatic attention that Syria has received since December 8th is a hugely promising sign. It's an indicator that there is major global interest in seeing Syria's political transition succeed and seeing economic recovery happen very quickly. Germany has announced new humanitarian support for Syria. Saudi Arabia, I understand, will be providing additional humanitarian aid for Syria. Qatar seems to be offering its investment support and reconstruction support. And we know that Turkey and Jordan and any number of other countries are also very interested in participating in Syria's reconstruction. And all of that, I think, is very positive. It signals the level of interest in ensuring stability and economic recovery in Syria.
All right, Stephen Heidemann, director of the Middle East Studies program at Smith College. Thanks so much for joining us on Al Jazeera. Great to get your perspective.
Thank you for having me.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.